Good morning, Valley View fourth graders. This is Mr. Peters here again with your next reading lesson. This is session 3 for our historical fiction unit. So, for this unit, so far we've been talking about the main characters and the setting of the story and how that impacts our characters. And so, today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how the time and place of a story can affect the character. So, it kind of goes with the setting, but the fact that we want to be thinking about the timeline of where the person is in their story and within the real world. So, did you know that big events happen in history and that those big events can cause some big things to happen? Um, but big historical events also affect individual lives. And so, we're going to talk about the way that works with our read aloud book, Number the Stars, and our character, Amory, and her family and friends. So, our goal today is to learn that in a historical fiction book, one can use timelines to show how major historical events affect individual lives. So, the first thing that I want you to do today is think about the idea of your life. And I know that you guys are only 9 and 10 years old, but your lives already, you've had different things happen within your life and within the world. And so the idea is with a timeline, it's just a way to track big events in your lives. So it could be like birthdays, vacations, field trips, things like that. So those things stand out and you mark them on the timeline. So one of the things that we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys a personal timeline for my life and also how it ties in with the real world too. So my personal timeline, I was born in 1985, much later than Mrs. Van Epperen. I went to kindergarten in 1990. One of the big events for my life was that I moved to a new city in 1999. I went to high school for 2000 to 2004, went to college in 2004. I met my wife in 2005, married my wife in 2011. We had our daughter in 2012 and our crazy son in 2014. So those are all some of the big events. Now, I could have put more events in there, but I just want to pick out a few of the big ones in my life so far. Now, the other thing, even though I had my life, the outside world was happening, and there are some events that happened during my time of my life. One of the first things that I kind of remember as a kid was the idea of the Desert Storm. It was a war in Iraq, and I remember being about 5 or 6 years old and watching some of the stuff on the news and seeing that happen. Another thing would be the end of the Cold War. That was a major event in world history. An event in our United States history was the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. Another thing in history was the Packers winning the Super Bowl in 1996. Baseball home run records shattered. One of the events that I remember within my time as a child is watching Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa and Barry Bonds all hitting all these crazy home run records. And that was an event that I particularly have a memory of. Unfortunately, one of the events I also in the world history that I have a connection to would be the September 11th attacks. Another more positive one was Michael Phelps winning 8 gold medals in the same Olympics. Another one would be Barack Obama's becoming the first African American president. And then a very more recent one would be the idea of this coronavirus outbreak. And so the idea is that these events in history, they tie into our lives. And you might not, you'd have these everyday moments in your life that you wouldn't remember if they weren't tied to an event. For example, for me, the September 11th attacks, I was a sophomore in high school, and I actually distinctly remember that day I was in gym class, and then word came out about these attacks that happened. And slowly throughout the day, we learned more information, but I still distinctly remember that day. And even though it was just some random day in high school where I personally was not directly impacted with the event that happened, I now have a memory of it because of that. Once again, same thing with Michael Phelps winning the 8 gold medals in the Olympics. That's an event that I wasn't involved in personally, but I remember where I was and watching it in the evenings and cheering them on and hearing those things. So even though somebody might not be directly involved with historical events, they have a impact on their lives. And so one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to look at Amory, our main character from Number the Stars, and we're going to see a little bit of a timeline of world events and then how Amory fits in with those as well. So for Anne Marie's personal timeline, what we have so far, we're not quite sure when she was born. We can assume it was a few years before 1943 when the soldier stopped her and her sister. But that was one of the events for her personally. We haven't gotten too far into the story, but that's really kind of what we have so far. But for the historical events that we can probably fit around Anne Marie's stuff, in 1942, Hitler recalls the German ambassador from Denmark. In 1943, Jewish people in Denmark were being rounded up and sent to concentration camps. And so these events, they were ones that were happening within the world and within parts of Anne Marie's world that could have had a direct impact on her. So as you are reading your historical fiction books, you want to figure out what your main character's timeline is and how does it fit into the real world events that happened. Um, Here are some of the events from our story that I have not put on the timeline yet because I'm unsure where to put them. Papa tells Amory a story about King Christian riding his horse through the city. We don't really quite know exactly when that was. We know it was in the past because it's in a flashback. Anne Marie's older sister is killed. Once again, we don't know the date or when that happened. We're led to believe that that was after, sorry about that, after the Germans, the Nazis attacked Denmark, but we don't quite know. So we are trying to figure out where these things fit in. And then Denmark is invaded by Germany in 1941. So that one I could probably put here at the beginning of our timeline, up at the top, before Hitler attacked as well. As we say here, it's not easy to tell where these events go. That is normal sometimes. But when you read, keep paying attention for clues that help you put the pieces of historical puzzle together. All right, so today, obviously, we're not going to be conferencing with you directly and seeing you, but as we come around, we want to make sure that you are asking yourself, how is your main character's timeline, and how does that relate with the historical time period or event that your story goes through? Now, sometimes you're going to have a very specific event, or it might be an era. So maybe you're reading about the settlers heading out west on the Oregon Trail. There's not necessarily an exact date. It was a range of years that this happened. Maybe it's during World War II that you're reading about, or maybe the American Revolution. So you want to pay attention to those time periods and try to figure out which part of those time periods your character is living in. All right, so the other thing we want you to do is make sure that you're using those anchor charts that we sent with you guys before you left school. And so use that reading packet that we have to really kind of help yourselves develop those really great responses that we know you can do. All right. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great day, Valley View, and enjoy your break next week. You guys deserve it. You've worked really hard this week. Once again, the fourth grade teachers, we love you guys. We care about you, and we know that you're just trying your best, and that's all that we can ask for. So keep up the great work.